It's incredible! Bang on target!
Se say me a beman kasankasa.
Me chinamina's one kasa. Ankasa.
To say that,
we back and then it's strong enough. Back up and say, or back and one which name.
That was me with your boy man.
Hey, I can't wear near more.
At Fonko Kulun Ghana Limited, our East Legon, a Champion Junction, for 0244 139 176.
Mr. Q, we are Q back.
Good evening and welcome to Hot News. We are live on Pan African Television. We are live on Facebook at Pan African Television. We are live on YouTube at Pan African Television. You can join us via our WhatsApp / text line on the WhatsApp line. You can it's displayed on the screen. You can send your views, comments, and contributions. We'll make it short. We'll make a time and read all those up for you. You can as well leave your suggestion, comments, and all of that on our Facebook social media, like all our social media pages. We'll make a time and read all those up for you. Tonight on Hot News, we are looking at the issue of some, reforms proposed by the Electoral Commission. The National Democratic Congress, after the proposals by the Electoral Commission, held a press conference in rejection or to reject those proposals made by the Electoral Commission. But before I introduce my guests for tonight's edition of the program, let's go and listen to what the Electoral Commission has been saying, the reforms they have proposed to all the stakeholders, in this country. Let's go and listen. We'll be right back.
Passed under the bridge, but it is important to point out, it is important at a point in time that we must come together as actors and stakeholders in Ghana's electoral processes to take stock of the processes, strategies, and approaches we adopted in the 2020 elections, highlight the areas that need to be strengthened, and build consensus on the reform agenda for the Commission for the coming years. In this regard, we should collectively examine the challenges we faced in the electoral processes of 2020 and identify what did not work and why. This is important to gain insight and understanding of why certain targets were not achieved. The Constitution and security is not one of our core minds. I use this occasion to clarify that the Electoral Commission is not responsible for election security. Although the entire electoral process and its success rests on the shoulders of the Commission, our mandate as entrenched in the Constitution does not include security. We do collaborate with our partners, our security agencies, in their quest to carry out their responsibility of ensuring peace, law and order at all centers throughout the country. We propose as a commission to close the polls at 3 p.m. rather than 5 p.m. In 2019, the commission announced its decision to close the polls at 3 p.m. rather than 5 p.m. in the 2020 election. Nonetheless, owing to the COVID-19 pandemic and the stringent and necessarily time-consuming safety protocols we instituted at our polling stations, we are compelled to put this proposal on hold. Over the past months, however, the proposal has resurfaced, and we believe that this is the time to discuss it and to reach some consensus on it. It was revealed that this is a workable proposal. as by 1 p.m. most polling stations were empty. Therefore, this is a reform we intend to discuss at this meeting today. Again, we propose to do away with the system of periodic nationwide registration exercises and institute an all-round system where citizens who turn 18 or persons who have not previously registered may visit any district office in Ghana with their Ghana card or passport and register as voters. We propose a year-round exhibition system that will enable citizens to check their registration details on their smartphones and other mobile devices. Citizens would not need to wait for an organized exhibition exercise to check their details. We propose to build further efficiency into our collation process by focusing on data entry only at the constituency collation center. We need to be guided by the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, that was the Electoral Commissioner, Madam Jane Mensah, addressing the media over there, talking about those reforms, the Electoral Commission would want to, probably embark on. But the National Democratic Congress has also held a press conference in rejection of those proposals made by the Electoral Commission. Let's go and listen to what the National Democratic Congress has been saying. We'll be right back.
1. Closure of polls at 3 p.m. in 2024. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the NDC finds a proposal by the Jane Mensah-led EC to change the closing time of polls from 5 p.m. to 3 p.m. Since the 1992 elections, polls have always closed at 5 p.m. This has worked perfectly without any challenges whatsoever. It therefore beggars belief that the EC would want to change this time-tested arrangement and go for a poorly thought-through alternative, which is bound to disenfranchise eligible voters and create needless problems for our electoral system. This is particularly so given the undue delay we usually record in the delivery of electoral materials to some polling stations and other technical challenges that usually characterize voting in this country. Ghanaians will recall, so before I go into that, even with the 5 o'clock, there are instances in some parts of the country that because materials did not arrive early, voting continued beyond the 5 o'clock. Machines got spoiled, etc. So many, and it's been going on consistently. And then now you want to close at 3 o'clock. Ghana is not Accra and Kumasi and Takoradi. In some of the rural areas, the poor farmers, they have to go to the farm, get food before they come and vote. So you create a situation where you are going to create unnecessary panic, tension, and confusion. Is this necessary at this time? Ghanaians will recall how a similar hasty decision by the EC to declare results within 24 hours after closure of polls in the 2020 elections failed miserably and led to the rushed declaration of a patently flawed results that yielded a percentage aggregate of more than 100% by the returning officer, Madam Jane Mensah. One would have thought that Jane Mensah would have learned the right lessons by now, but that appears not to be the case. You were all here when they announced that they were going to declare results in 24 hours. You were all here. We told you and we told them, this is not going to work. It doesn't make sense. As usual. So when we say she is arrogant, disrespectful, that is another classical example. We told you, we told her, it is not going to work. What happened? Eventually, she had to eat back her own words and then declare the results on the 9th.
That was the Director of Elections for the National Democratic Congress addressing the media over there. And their rejection to the proposals made by the Electoral Commission, the National Democratic Congress has been saying that one of the proposals where the Electoral Commission has proposed that polls will close at 3, the National Democratic Congress is in total disagreement with that. Also, they have disagreed with a lot of the proposals made by the Electoral Commission, and basically that's what we are going to be looking at. We really need reforms, and are those proposals made by the Electoral Commission ones that by electoral system going forward or going into the 2024 elections. Also, the New Patriotic Party in their press conference addressed by the Director of Communications for the party has agreed with the proposals made by the Electoral Commission. So it's an issue between other political parties, the NDC, and that of the Electoral Commission. But I've been joined in the studio by Elikem Kotoko, member of the National Democratic Congress Communications team. Elikem, good evening.
Good evening, Justice.
How are you doing, my brother?
We are giving life.
All right, also in the studio is Kwesi Kwati, who is a member of the New Patriotic Party Communications team. Kwesi, good evening.
Good evening, Justice.
How are you doing, my brother?
I'm always
It's
fine.
been a while on this program.
Yeah, I'm around.
Very well. Where have you been?
I told you. I mean, school and other engagements. So, but so far,
well, so far, very well. Let me start with you, Elikem, on the NDC's decision to reject the reforms proposed by the Electoral Commission. What are your bases?
yeah. Thank you so much once again, Justice, for this opportunity. I would want to say good evening to our most cherished viewers who have had time to be with us this evening. Before I quickly jump onto the matter of the EC and the NDC's positions on those proposals, I will quickly want to remind our cherished viewers, because this is in the interest of the media, that you recall the Ministry of National Security issued a release that relieved 4 officers of their secondment to their secretariat. That was issued by the sector, Kandapa. I wish to state and let viewers know that Colonel Frank Ajiman, who was also said to be one of the culprits or the people who maltreated Caleb, kicked him in the groin, has rather earned for himself a promotion. He has been elevated to become the commanding officer of the 64 Infantry, the most elite and prestigious unit of our military, which is more resourced in order to help the work of the national security. And that is very sad. I mean, very, very sad for our country. But I think it is up to you, the media, also to do more follow-ups, as one of your own was maltreated in that manner. With reference to the Electoral Commission's position vis-a-vis that of the NDC in relation to reforms, it is good to state on record that the NDC is not against reforms, because as living beings, we are in an environment where there are bound to be reforms.
If you are not against reforms, then why then is the NDC kicking against the reforms proposed by the Electoral Commission? You
recall when we were voting in the past, we were doing it in very non-transparent boxes, and we transformed to the very transparent ones. If the NDC opposed that, could we not have made that? No. We opposed the reforms on the backdrop of certain principles and the fact that it appeared a very hasty decision, just like one of those that took us, were taken through in the 2020 elections, where the Electoral Commission chair told us she was going to declare results in 24 hours, and she became a blatant liar and a square peg in a round hole, as usual. If you look at the reforms one after the other, I can touch on about 3. The first one is the closure of polls that has been brought forward from 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock.
What's wrong with that?
It makes absolutely no sense to anybody, unless there is anyone to convince you and I the reasons behind that. 1, election days in Ghana are not holidays, where people just sit home and do nothing. Employers expect their employees to report to work. Our market women, our fathers, farmers, all are expected to go to farm and the market to do their usual work before returning maybe to even vote. And we all know these things as a matter of fact. So if you are now rather closing the period within which people are to exercise that franchise, shortening it by 2 hours, you are finding an avenue to disenfranchise a lot of eligible voters. Don't forget that there has been a lot of instances, even in the just ended elections, where 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours after the official time, elections had not started at some of those centers as either a result of the failure of EC officials to be present or all other stakeholders to be present, or some malfunction of an equipment, or one or other reasons. And so what will be the basis on which one will think that today that period should be closed? Some proponents who actually are defending this are saying that, oh, because when we close at 5, counting goes into the night, and as a result, ballot snatching happens and all of that. It ties in, it brings in a question about Ghana's electricity penetration rate. If we have electricity at all our rural areas, that would actually mitigate against some of these concerns people are raising about even ballot box snatching, etc. Which also tells you that security must be adequately provided, not party hoodlums wearing clothes of the military that we saw as happened in 2020. That is one. Then number two, don't also forget that when elections close, voting closes at 5 o'clock or at 3 o'clock, it meant that anybody in the queue was going to be stopped. No, we have voted many times, and we all know that even when elections closes at 5, it means all the people in the queue will still have to be allowed to vote and to cast their votes. So even if you bring it to 3 o'clock and there are still people in the queue who will be allowed till 5 o'clock, it is not an advantage in any way and still an exercise of disenfranchising people. The other second major concern has been the fact that we want to look at making our how do you call it? The registration exercise for the voter ID an all-round activity, an all-day-round activity. We have raised concerns of the quality and the integrity of the EC in ensuring that exercise. And one will ask why. One of the major reasons remains, as you and I speak today, Justice, is it not very appalling, very disappointing and very shameful that over a year or so after our registration exercise or after acquiring our voter ID, the voter ID still does not it still remains a card you cannot use for any official transaction in this country as we speak. So the banks are not accepting it, and so it only tells you that it was just an exercise that was taken in haste in order to fulfill a certain mission, which maybe has been seen through, and now there can be that laxity to see how well to go about it now. And that is why we are in that problem. One of the other concerns has been the fact that we have had what we call the regional collation centers. That is actually an illegality, especially with reference to the presidential results.
What makes it illegal?
The Constitution mandates that there's only one returning officer for the presidential results. Any intermediary between the polling station and the EC chair is an illegality. Because the Constitution makes it clear that there shall be only a returning officer. So it is actually unfounded to have allowed that to go through another person first, who now becomes the verifier of what was done at the base before it now goes to another person. And so now if you want to even challenge that, do you challenge it from the region or you challenge it from the polling station? So these are major concerns, and an illegality cannot be condoned even if it is an afterthought that, okay, this was an illegality. And we cannot allow that to happen. We are a country governed by laws. If, however, others also come with some suggestions that, oh, but you decided to boycott the Appiah. You decided not to be part of that. It is equally a democratic right that is being expressed. It is under the democratic rules for you to actually decide to express an objection to a certain process if for one way or the other you feel you have not been treated well.
Now let's look at the all-round, or all year-round registration and all of that. Is that not going to reduce, a situation where people would have to go and mass up, at the various centers in order to register and all of that, facing a whole lot of issues, problems, and all those things? If the Electoral Commission has been able to initiate that, today somebody can walk to the office or any office of the Electoral Commission and get registered without any problem? Or is that not to reduce the stress that comes with?
You see, one of the challenges
registration
that you and I should even be looking at, for instance, is that it will make a lot of nonsense of the residency requirements of the Constitution and lead to voter displacement. If I visit a constituency office at Denu, for instance, right, and I claim that I am from, or I reside at Blekusu, how will that be verified? Because of the daily process in that. How would that be verified? Since I can just easily go in anytime at all to do so. Now, don't also forget that that is the reason why before this can be done, it is expected that you allow or other parties who are stakeholders be involved in order to ensure that there is quality work being done, there is fairness, there is objectivity, and there's apt professionalism.
But other stakeholders were invited to the IPAC meeting, yes, except that the National Democratic Congress, the party you belong to, really rejected the proposals made at IPAC. In fact, NDC refused to attend the said meeting.
If you recall, the question should be, why did the NDC take that step? You recall some of the unpalatable, unprintable, or very reckless comments by the Deputy Commissioner, for instance, Eric Bosman, calling the NDC the major problem to the progress of the development of this country. If you have an umpire who is in charge of a match, engage in submissions such as that, trying to call one of the players such names, it tells you that he already has a preconceived idea.
All right. Can you step down for me? Yes. I'll come back to you.
Now, don't also forget that as we are on this platform, if by one way or the other, you as a moderator decide to show disrespect to my brother here or myself, he is at liberty to walk out of the studio, whether the cameras are live or not. And so if the NDC felt that, look, we are raising major concerns of total disrespect to us continually by the EC, where they put up a certain posture that you are just invited, but you can say whatever you want to say as contributions, but it will not be taken into cognizance when we are making reforms. So what is the point in having me present there at all to even make what contributions if my contributions don't matter? And you think that you are an island or you are autonomous, and by your logical reasoning, autonomy means that don't involve others, you alone must take the decision. Then do so and let us proceed, and let's see if that would advance the developmental or the democratic progress of this beautiful country called Ghana.
I hope you know that IPAC is instituted for advisory,
exactly,
and all of that. And the Electoral Commission is not, binded by any decision that was made at IPAC. And so the EC can decide to take advices that were given to them.
I think another is even from the path of law and may even help buttress that very well. I think it's Article 23 or so. That equally also tells that in executing these duties as well, you are expected to exhibit some fairness and objectivity in the things you do. In exhibiting that fairness and objectivity, it is to allow for that. That is why it is called democracy.
Statements made by the persons you mentioned, like the Deputy Commissioner of the Electoral Commission, Dr. Bosman Asari, and then the Commissioner herself, Madam
The Commissioner herself told you.
Wait a minute, I'm saying that those statements, would you agree that those statements should not prevent the NDC from attending IPAC meetings?
I believe that showing gross disrespect to the NDC will warrant the NDC to take an action that it deemed fit.
What do you describe as gross disrespect?
I gave you an example of that, of his comments, of his position, of his posturing.
But if a political party appears to be so, you mean that, by the dint or by the fact that he is Deputy Electoral Commissioner, he should not mention that.
If he saw the posturing of the NDC of making suggestions and taking strong positions on those suggestions to be some kind of withholding the progress of Ghana's democracy, to say, it is not mere words, it's not just to say that. Saying, for instance, that the NDC is actually stalling the progress of our democracy. Those are strong word affirmations to be made by him. And it is very significant to also tell you that when you have an electoral commissioner who has acted herself as a square peg in a round hole on two bases, on the fact that she told you and I that she was going to declare results in 24 hours, you and I knew that was not possible, but she failed to see beyond that. Then secondly, this was the same woman who told you and I that she was going to involve facial recognition in the electoral process. And that was the reason why the figure of the cost of the equipment was expensive. Eventually, we voted, and there was no facial recognition. So she has ripped us off, and she even ought to be audited for us to see clearly what went wrong and what exactly was done with what amount with reference to the Electoral Commission.
All right, thank you so much, Elikem, for some viewers. You are still watching us, right here on Pan African Television. This is Hot News. You can share the Facebook Live as many times as you can for other people to also get an opportunity to watch tonight's edition of the program. Now, let me come to you, Kwesi, on the NDC's decision to reject the reform proposals from the Electoral Commission and your party's decision to accept all those proposals made by the Electoral Commission. On what grounds is your party, agreeing with the Electoral Commission?
Okay, very well. Thank you very much once again, Justice, and a very good evening to you and my good brother Elikem here. Today, Elikem has been quite admirable in his presentation. I hope we are able to have this conversation just admirably like that. At least he's speaking to issues, and we'll just respond accordingly. Justice, one major important point that we all need to probably be cognizant of is that proposals for reforms, however the nature it is, remains proposals until they are ratified by that body which has the powers to ratify them, whether through a legal means or probably through a conventional means. And so at no point should probably a proposal be described as outrightly illegal. Well, it still remains a proposal and it can be ratified by legal means. It is the more reason why you have the EC every 4 years or so tabling CIs at Parliament for the purpose of appropriation and ratification to be adopted as a constitutional instrument to regulate the elections. And so that must be made clear. Again, well, I want to just pinpoint one very instructive point for all of us, that the NDC bastardizes the EC, runs the state institution, and funny enough, I think it's something that the political device has been doing, especially when you find yourself in opposition. But the kind of bad faith that our brothers have exhibited for, coming from the past years is quite astronomical.
You did worse than this.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying that I agree that, but the point is that we must grow in our democratic practice. But interestingly, on one side, you demonizes the EC, you want to run our state institution down, you incite people against the EC, you boycott the EC's meeting, and make a U-turn and proposes to the EC your counter proposals and expect the same institution that you demonized just a few days ago, the same institution that you bastardized just a few days ago, to adopt your proposals, hail your proposals, and rather jettison what was agreed upon between the other parties. I think it is instructive for Ghanaians to know. But it is also
instructive for you to know that they have raised certain concerns about the posture of the Electoral Commission that needs to be looked at.
We'll come into that.
He said the commissioner herself and one of the deputies made certain statements against the NDC's, general secretary and that of the NDC in itself, which they find unpalatable and think that the Electoral Commission is not being fair to the National Democratic Congress. So, citing an example of you or himself walking out of the studio, if I disrespect any of you, would you agree that these are some of the things that have actually put the NDC in the position in which they are today, to an extent that they would have to boycott IPAC meetings organized by the EC? They have raised concerns that the EC would only come, impose decisions they have already taken on IPAC and all of that, and you expect them to be there. Isn't it fair that they have boycotted IPAC because of the posture of the Electoral Commission?
Justice, I will not sit here and hold brief for the NDC or the Electoral Commission.
Okay.
But I just also want to have a question, because at the end of the day, the NDC is making U-turn and probably making counter proposals will not cure all this mischief, will it? If it cures all this mischief, then probably we can't hold that the argument that they are making is valid. On one side, you demonize the institution. On the other side, you make U-turn and expect the same institution that you demonize to all of a sudden become angelic and then start propelling or pushing your agenda. It doesn't work that way. But like I said earlier, if you, recall, even I think Elikem gave it in his earlier premise when he outlined his conversation, because if you look at democratic parties and electoral dispensation over the years, at every year there are reforms. This is not the first time that we are having a reform as a people. And so the reforms, of course, is to deepen our democracy and strengthen our electoral process. So it is not out of the blues if Electoral Commission or any other institution proposes a reform, particularly when they want to assess the previous election and upon that use that as a basis or the benchmark or probably a good norm to propose other reforms going forward. And I think some of the concerns that the NDC has raised, for me, they are valid concerns, especially when they are parties to the electoral process and a democratic dispensation. But the point is that we must interrogate some of the concerns that they've raised to see how logically consistent these concerns are, to see whether or not these concerns that they've raised, they are actually justifiable and not necessarily justifiable, but they are reasonably justifiable. When you look at some of the proposed reforms that the EC made, I think there are some of them that even the NDC do not even disagree on principle. Because if you look at some of the proposals borders on matters of registration, exhibition, filing of nominations, elections, and security. And so my point is that if NDC probably wants to disagree on some of the proposals, it should be clear. But the impression should not be made to look like the entire proposal that were made was something that they disagree. Again, it demonstrates once again their bad faith. Because on one side, you adopt some of the proposal made by the same EC that you do not trust. And on the other side, you reject some. Those proposals that you feel favors you, you quickly embraces them. And those that you think does not favor you, then you demonize them. Well, if you look at the proposal, say, for instance, I want to cite one example on the registration process. And I think the proposal is to implement the continuous voter registration exercise to enable citizens who turn 18 years and those who had not previously registered to do so. For me, it is a fantastic proposal. NDC raised a very solid and fantastic concern that it will probably burden the political parties a lot, especially now that they have to probably recruit some of their agents to man these offices of the electoral commissions. It is a problem that is not only peculiar to NDC. It is a problem that will also be peculiar to the NPP. I mean, and even extended to all the other political parties.
Accept these proposals?
So you see, it is the more reason why we have to raise the conversation in a larger scope and not limiting it to finance. Because I have heard arguments from other side about even political party funding. So it would have been more prudent for the NDC to be there so that we find an alternative source of funding for some of these critical policies or reforms that has been proposed. Of course, we can be looking at even the state funding such reforms. And so you do not just sit at the bench, throw tantrums, and on the other side, assess some of the proposals. A proposal like, say, which has probably become the bone of contention. And
closing polls
yes,
at 3.
Closing polls at 5.
At 3.
Yes, at 3. Justice, if you ask me, there is nothing really special about 5 p.m. Because if you look at the
essence... No, but they have raised issues. They are saying that... Wait a minute. They are saying that if you go to the rural areas, you have people who would want to at least go to their farms, come back and come and cast their votes. Because maybe in the mornings there may be queue and all of that. And you are closing polls at 3. These persons may get home at around 3 o'clock, expecting that they have some 2 more hours to be able to go and cast their votes. And you are saying that we have closed. How do you expect those people to
This proposal did not just come out of the blues. Neither did they came from any vacuum. If you look at it critically, there are structural problems that the EC began to address even before the 2020 elections. Because if you look at a polling station, for instance, at some point the polling station could have over 1,000 people, 2,000 people voting at one polling station. And so reforms came, and one polling station at some point will have maximum 500 people, some 300, some less. And so if at the end you are voting and probably the voting ends at 7 with say 2,000 voters, and today you have the same polling station having about 500 voters, reasonably and logically, it won't be logically consistent to still maintain the same hours. And let's listen to some of the arguments that the EC has advanced. And you have to interrogate all of them. Ghanaians must know whether or not some of these arguments are valid.
To the arguments and their interrogations, isn't it also instructive to interrogate what informed the Electoral Commission's decision on these reforms.
Exactly, that's why I was coming.
Their thoughts and all of that. Why would the Electoral Commission come out and say that we are proposing that polls close at 3? Why would the Electoral Commission say that, well, we are looking at all year round registration? So when somebody attains 18 years, the person can walk to any EC's office to, register and all of that. The question is,
I think we must take one at a time.
Do we have problems with these processes as they are, as it stands now, for these proposals to have been mandated in the first place?
Justice. I think if you want to ask such a question, probably we should have even maintained the opaque ballot boxes and still be using them. As at every point in our electoral process, we grow. There are reforms. And so even if you look at the proposal that has been proposed by the Electoral Commission, most of these proposals complement each other. You can take the proposals one after the other and interrogate them. For instance, the proposal that has generated a debate or contention, I have insisted on many platforms, and I will insist that there is nothing really special about the 5 p.m. The argument that has been advanced is that people will go to their farms and other things. Yes, people can still go to their farms even if it's extended to 10 p.m. You see, just as one most important thing that we all have to let the citizens know, that on that special day and relative to that special exercise that we are having, it is a sacred exercise. As an exercise that can determine the kind of education that you get. So people shouldn't eat? Yes, of course, you can. Anyway, even if you make it 10 p.m., people can decide.
No, I'm asking a question.
No, I'm saying that even
people shouldn't eat because we are voting on 7th December.
Justice, I am saying that, you see, it's human instincts and psychology. The more reason why you feel that people need more time is because they have an alternative of 5 p.m. If you make it even 10 p.m., you can have people who will give you justifiable reasons as to whether or not they can. If you say there's something so unique about 5, what is so unique about 3 o'clock? Good, we should good, very well. I think that's why I was drawing. You should have allowed me to learn. And I'm saying that if you look at the reasoning and applying the purposive approach of interpretation as to why the Electoral Commission is proposing this reform, you look at it as the election has not been an event, but the process. Even on the voting, it's not just an event, it's a process. At the end of the day, you will have to probably bring reforms that will deepen the transparency of the process. And so if there are any structural reforms that will mitigate some of the probably the bad perceptions about the process, how we try to mitigate it. And I'm saying that, hold on, Justice, I think you are just repeating the same question.
Wait a minute. You are not, listen.
I think he's trying to do your job. I applauded him for being nice today.
But see, I'm not asking same questions. My first question was to interrogate the brain behind the Electoral Commission.
And I was answering you.
Wait a minute. And you are saying on this platform that there's nothing unique about 5 o'clock.
There's nothing.
And I asked you what is so unique about 3 o'clock.
Exactly.
And in answering that, you told me point blank that it will reduce, opaqueness. I mean, it will bring about some sort of.
You should have allowed me to. Wait a minute. I was saying the same question.
And I'm saying that how would closing polls at 3 ensure transparency in an election?
I'm saying that
simple.
At the end of the day.
So that cannot.
At the end of the day, I'm saying that at the end of the day, any structural reforms that will mitigate some of the tension, some of the security concerns. Because at the end, if you look at probably an election closing at 5, and the likelihood or the temptation that collation, that's why I said the election, for instance, is not an event, but it's a process. And so collation probably eating into the night. Usually under the umbrella of the night and the darkness, that is where you have this general anxiety, there is delay in the collation process, a whole lot of suspicions and tensions, and at the end it has a whole lot of national security implications. And I'm saying that based on some of these peculiar reasons that has been cited by the EC, it is more reasonably justifiable and logically consistent that you try to mitigate some of these concerns that are associated with closing at 5. Indeed, if you care to know, there are countries even in sub-Saharan Africa that closes elections at 1. If you go to Nigeria, for instance, by 3 p.m. they have started counting. The whole essence is to try to engage public to probably observe and ensure that scrutiny. For me particularly, this is the best opportunity even for the opposition if they were smart.
You've not told me how this will ensure transparency.
Probably you also fail to understand, because at the end I was able to prove to you that
Who says when we close polls in a broad daylight, still if electoral commission is poised to rig for a certain political party, they won't do it?
It is also the more reason why went under the sun, where probably you can see and everybody can be around and ensure. You see, the whole essence is to attempt to mitigate some of the problems that will happen.
If we close polls at 3 o'clock, counting wouldn't eat into the night. And if there will be rigging, I mean, during the night, people are likely to still rig.
Justice, per the logic that you are saying, then probably we should even be closing polls at 12 a.m. the following day.
So
I'm suggesting to you that the whole essence is to try and mitigate some of this. And again,
then the electoral commission should say that we should close polls at 12 o'clock.
It's possible within the context that at the end of the day, more police stations have been created.
It wouldn't make sense.
No, it wouldn't make sense. No, Justice, I'm saying that you are forgetting the fact that if probably at the end of the day, there was a polling station that had around 2,000 votes. Today, there have been reforms that polling station is having 500 voters. So the number of people have reduced. By even per the observation that we made from the 2020 elections, as at 1 p.m., there was literally no person in the pool. Why should we wait till say 5 p.m. and then wait for the night to come, especially where there are places where there are no lighting system and other things? And like I said, the solution is to extend the power grid or something. Yes, that is I mean, it sounds so easy. But let's face the problem holistically, and let's look at it from the realistic point of view. Is it possible that within the coming years we can have an extension of electricity to all these places?
Let's also face a reality in here that, look, there are some places where the electoral commission is unable to get its materials to the place even on time.
So the solution,
the
solution, you see, it's because probably the electoral commission also have the luxury of time, that they know that polls are supposed to close at 5 p.m. and so they can delay. If indeed
that cannot be the case.
No, because if we are just like our general attitude even towards the voting.
So if we are supposed to start polls at 7, and you know that we are supposed to start polls at 7 and close at 5, and you take your materials to places at about 9, 10 o'clock, and you still close at 5. Why? If we have a polling center, a polling station that has huge numbers, what it means is that at 5 o'clock,
we are talking about no such problems, a general problem. Those are isolated cases. You are talking as though such problems are a general problem.
So these are issues that we need to talk about. These are issues that we need to look at.
There are also issues where ask ourselves. There are 1 p.m. where people
ask ourselves if the 3 p.m. is feasible.
I'm saying, Justice, I'm suggesting to you that there is nothing special about the 5 p.m. There is really nothing special about the 5 p.m.
But you didn't tell me what is so special about the purpose of the 5 p.m.
Is the argument has always been about to give a reasonable period of time for people to vote. And I'm saying that argument is not sustainable. The reason being that at the end of the day, if you make it 3 p.m., the people are organically and naturally also going to adapt to the 3 p.m. The more reason why people are probably going to delay, and you can advance the argument of people going to farm and delay and those trivial arguments, is because they know.
You and I would also agree. Now, wait a minute, before I go to Ellie, you and I would also agree that there are some polling stations, polls start polls started at exactly 7 o'clock, and at 5 o'clock we are unable to finish with the process. What explanation would the electoral commission have?
It comes to what I'm saying, that the whole idea is to mitigate them.
So if you are saying if you are saying that we should close polls at 3 o'clock,
so per that logic, since they couldn't finish, probably let's also postpone it to 10 p.m. Because the whole idea is also to
but you are very much aware that you are very much aware.
The solution to that is not to maintain the 5 p.m. hour.
What is the solution?
The solution is to get the items there quite early.
And I'm saying that there are places they got the items there at exactly at a stipulated time. Polls started at the stipulated time, but at the time to close polls, we are unable to finish that.
It is the whole reason.
What explanations would the electoral commission give?
That's what I'm saying.
Those situations.
I even made it.
How do they factor those situations into the 3?
Justice, I even made it clear earlier on that some of the proposals even complement each other. It is a more reason why both political parties, especially the leading ones and other political parties, will have to hold the issue to account
especially with regards to the creation of more polling stations, so that we will be able to have reduced numbers at the polling station, so that we won't be able to have this how do you call it, these incidents that you are saying. But Justice, if I was in the opposition and I was smarter, this is the opportunity for me, because most of these alleged instances of rigging, coalition abuses, and other things, it mostly happens in the night. And so this is the fine opportunity, if you had a smarter opposition in the NDC, probably to embrace this reform, so that we will do this coalition and counting process at a much reduced time, so that it doesn't get into the night. And so when that happens, you are able to engage public scrutiny, and then the increasing transparency. So I insist there is nothing really special about the 5 p.m. and the 3 p.m. will probably mitigate some of these concerns about security, the tension, and the transparency that we are talking about.
All right. Thank you so much, Kwesi Kwarteng, for submission. Viewers, you're still watching Hot News right here on Pan-African Television with me. Text line. We'll make a time and read all those out for you. You can as well leave your suggestions, questions, and whatnot on our social media pages. You can share the Facebook Live post. We are live on Facebook at Pan-African Television. Share that. You leave your comments over there. We'll make a time and read all those stuff for you as well. Now, Elikem, you would want to respond to some of the things said by...
You know, I mean, I think my brother is doing his very best, which is very good. I don't fault him. I think he's attempting very beautifully to defend the indefensible. I mean, for him to say there's nothing special about 5 p.m. and yet spending all the time not telling what is special about 3 p.m. and only resorting to probability that the 3 p.m. probably will do this and that, it tells you that there's a cost-90 mission here. Now, you see, if you are not able to tell me convincingly why you think that a lengthier time is not better compared to a shorter time, then I'm sorry, there's no reason for me to actually follow that sheepishly. Because if even, as you said, we close at 5, there are still challenges in some places because the EC people start very late. And now, it is even now making it look as if it is a deliberate attempt at some places to make it late because that is in our DNA or it's in our behavior. That is the most unprofessional conduct by the empire to our electoral process. Now, when you are talking of the fact that you want to close polls earlier, what is the reason? Give us the reasons why you want to close. Okay, we want to count elections early enough not to go into the night. Why do you have a problem with us going into the night? Because there are some rural areas that do not have electricity. And I'll keep repeating that it brings us to PDS. On account of that, I'll tell you today that the same Ameri innovation deal that we were told was inflated and they had come to renegotiate is being prepared to be moved to the Ashanti region. If we can have more of such, and when we were leaving power, our electricity penetration got to 85%, 85.6. Where have we gotten to since 2017 till date? Less than 2%. And so one other challenge is because electricity penetration in our rural areas is very poor. It's bad. It's been at a snail's pace. That is why you even think that we don't have electricity there. And it tells you and I that if you have apostles of the regime, rather now defending why we need to close it. It should tell you that they have no plan to even extend electricity widely to some of these places, so that they also be beneficiaries of due process in fair time. Because like you said, it is not about only creating polling centers or trying to say this or that. Tell us concretely, what convincing steps influence the decision to want to make these reforms? Don't forget, the NDC made its counter proposals as a result of democratic principles. We are very much aware that we are a strong force in Parliament, but even that will come to eventually.
You as a party,
yes,
you know, has bastardized.
Yes.
This institution
justice
you don't trust.
Yes.
The NDC do not trust the Electoral
Commission. So you expect that because we don't trust them, because
how do you expect the Electoral Commission to work with your reforms?
We are not saying they should work with our reforms. We are
why then did you make the proposal in the first place?
Justice, we are making the reforms known not only to the Electoral Commission,
but to who?
We are making it known to both the Electoral Commission and to Ghanaians as well. Now, this is not about the Electoral Commission. That is what people need to know.
What makes you think that your proposal is better than that?
Not about the Electoral Commission.
Wait a minute. What makes you think that your proposal is better than what was made by the Electoral Commission, and that Ghanaians need to know that of what you have proposed.
We are very convinced beyond every shred of doubt that every logical reasoning being who listens to any reason that's been adduced for why polls have to be closed earlier or early than the usual has been will not be convinced. And you see, that attitude of us wanting to equate ourselves to some countries, and especially to even have the effrontery to make mention of Nigeria, tells you that we have fallen flat in the face of integrity and democratic principles. You think Nigeria is one of the leading examples for Ghana to use as an example for electoral processes? We do not want to jump into that because of diplomatic relationships. But do you really think Nigeria is an example for Ghana to use in actually talking about our electoral processes? Come on. Secondly, are we saying that as a country, in anything we want to do, it has to be based on some reference or example from somewhere, and we cannot lead ourselves and decide that this is just best and let us keep it so? Then after all, by the submissions of my brother, I think we need to begin looking at, even as a country, looking at shortening the tenure of office of our leaders if they are above 65 years or 70 years. Because it appears that we're letting leaders that are above 70 years and have contributed zilch to our progress. Retardation. We should be considering some of these things, rather. You see, so if my brother had been able to even tell me one or two reasons why he thinks that, but he was only saying it will mitigate. Mitigate how? It will probably do this how? Let me know why you are even convinced that this closing of polls at 3 p.m. is better than 5 p.m. Because in all instances, processes will still lead into the night.
But people are of the view that the NDC's run is born out of your disaffection for the Electoral Commission.
That is the perception of some people who have failed to appreciate the crux of the matter that has been raised, which is even in their own interest. I have stated here, for instance,
what is wrong for somebody attaining 18 years to walk straight to Electoral Commission's office to register? What is wrong for polls to be closed at 3?
That is why I raise concerns
that
you.
Some people will go to farm. If you know that if you know that that day is a voting day and you would want to participate,
will you agree as a journalist?
You would, of course,
will you agree as a journalist,
be around and do whatever it is.
Will you agree that as a journalist, those of you in the media space have on a couple of occasions also confirmed cases where people have assumed or suggested that there were vote partings or underage voting at other places? Will you agree with me? There have been news stories by most media houses.
There have been allegations of that nature.
Will you agree with me? Now, if that is one of the concerns that have been raised by many, which have found itself in the media space, it tells you and I, what do we do to mitigate that? If I will not be involved in the process leading to the regular registration of people at the polling at the various district offices, then I have every reason to believe that there will be some connivance with some persons at one point or the other, either because someone has a deeper pocket or the other is a taller one or another is the most influential, and that will compromise the integrity of the moral fiber of our electoral process. And that is one major concern we should all be worried about. That is why, if you listen to him and even the NDC is not against the all-round registration process. But the NDC is rather adding on that if that can be the case, then there ought to be A, B, C, and D in order to strengthen the process. And therefore, if the thinking process was apt and there was a vacuum, the NDC is saying that this and that. Someone will now say that
in a double standard.
No, the NDC is not.
When wait a minute.
Yes.
Is the NDC not engaging in the double standard when we all know that the NDC do not trust the Electoral Commission? Yet you would want to add on to proposals they've made.
Whether we trust the EC or not, presently that is the EC. Are you saying because we do not trust them and therefore we should just stay mute and probably not even engage in the electoral process because we do not trust the empire? We will, and when there are anomalies, we will point it out and blow the whistle immediately in order to ensure that Ghanaians see for themselves what we are seeing. And so when you have suggestions like, oh, but you say you don't trust and you are playing double standards, I don't see the double standards there. In fact, if there are any group of people who have rather played double standards, it will be my brothers. You recall the ESLA, which I always mention, and even the VAT, which they kicked against, but today they are the greatest beneficiaries and have increased that as many times as they can in their capacity as a regime in charge of our coffers. So it hasn't got to do with plain double standards, but it has rather got to do with principles that we disagree with this, and we make that known to the public that we disagree. However, it does not bar us from listening to what they are saying, because our televisions are on, we listen to our radio, and we watch all this. And once we see and it is wrong, we still owe it a duty of service as citizens to make sure, and as a major political party, to make an input to say what we believe ought to be the right way. And doing that is not as a result of even being members of IPAC. It's because we are also partakers or stakeholders in the electoral process. That is why I wish to remind everybody that the entire process itself is not even about the Electoral Commission. It's about you and I. It's about the NDC, the NPP, and the NDC, about Ghanaians.
The NDC in your press conference has made some fantastic observations.
Yes.
You have, proposed very fantastic, reforms and all of that. But unfortunately, NDC boycotted IPAC. People are of the view that if the NDC was at the IPAC meeting, these issues you have raised in your press conference could have been raised over there.
Whoever says so is not far from right, but it's equally also not far from wrong. The reasons being that not being present at the IPAC meeting does not seclude us or does not bar us from making submissions towards that. Don't forget.
So here in the press conference, who were you making those submissions to?
That is what I'm saying, that it is not to the EC alone, but to the EC and to Ghanaians at large.
You can make the submissions to Ghanaians, but the buck stops with the EC because they would have to engage in that.
That is why you need to know that yes, the buck stops. And that posture in which they took that we are the EC, you can come and rant and say whatever, but we will not take it. I'm sorry, you can talk. So there was no need to be present there. Then it was best for us to act as Ghanaians from outside. When we hear, then we make our submissions. That is what Ghanaians do after all. Because aside the political parties being part of IPAC, you would agree with me that when these submissions, these things come on board, Ghanaians call into radio stations and make their inputs also heard that, hey, I also think that this is wrong, that and that. People who are calling into the radio stations and the TV stations or writing articles to condemn the intention or any reform regarding the timing, the regional regulation, etc. They are telling you as Ghanaians, not as NDC people. And that is why if anybody tries to say, oh, but you want out of IPAC, it is neither here nor there. Your rights have not been taken from you as a political party and as citizens to still make contributions towards that very reforms that the EC is thinking of. And that is why it is instructive to state here that do not forget that the NDC is very much aware that it equally holds a very strong presence in our legislature, which is also the lawmaking body of this beautiful country that we find ourselves in. Therefore, there are still other avenues for the NDC to make inputs.
All right, thank you so much, Elikem, for your submission. Kwesi, take us home.
Justice, I think if you look at the argument that has been advanced once again by Elikem, it's an argument of repetition and of ideas. Because at the end of the day, if you look at all the reasons justifying why it's 7 p.m., probably it presupposes that even the 7 p.m. is not even adequate. And we may be looking at even extending it to 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and then maybe 3 days fast. What I'm saying is that the 5 p.m. had a purpose. And reasonably, the 5 p.m., the purpose of maintaining that 5 p.m. time of voting or closing of polls has outlived its usefulness.
How?
Why am I saying that? Yes. I am saying it has outlived its usefulness because of the interventions that has been brought by the Electoral Commission. And so if you look at the intervention, like say...
What interventions did they bring?
Yes. So if you had allowed me to proceed, if you look at the interventions, like say, reducing the number of voters at a polling station in the last elections, for instance, where it is a recorded data that as at 1 p.m., a lot of polling stations, there was nobody in the queue voting. And so there was no reason why, reasonably, at a time where all the people that were supposed to vote have voted, you still say that you are waiting till 5 p.m. to count. That is the more reason why I'm saying that.
Kwesi, wait a minute. If apart from
I'm getting to
allow me.
He's a moderator.
Are you aware that whilst at 1 p.m. certain polling stations people were done voting, at 5 p.m., people were still voting at other polling stations.
So is there more reason why earlier on? That's why I said Elikem was not listening to me. Most of the proposals that had been made complements each other. Because if you look at some of the proposals, for instance, the issue was saying that at every point, when places where the results are ready, they should make declarations at a regional level, especially relative to the parliamentary ones. And so, if you look at, say, the instance that you made, where at places people are still voting, but you look at other polling stations, majority, about 90% had finished. What do? We have to count and make declaration. Provided
90% did not finish at 1 o'clock in the 2020.
No. We are all making assumptions. As that now,
we cannot base our discussion on assumptions.
No. Justice, I'm saying that what you said was an instance, and I'm saying that I'm also borrowing the same instance. Because that now, nobody is speaking to
I know for a fact that in the 2020 elections, at 5 o'clock, there were some police stations where people were...
I know for a fact that in the 2020 elections, as at 1 p.m., there were lots of police stations that had finished.
But it wasn't up to 90%.
Justice, you should allow me to flow. No, it wasn't up to 90%, but I'm saying that significant number of them. And so it complements with the proposal.
So you say significant number of them. How many police stations...
I mean, come on, you cannot
finish,
such a question at 1 o'clock. What kind of question, how do you expect me to give you offered? Even the EC supposed to go by his records to be able to. I'm not able to give you. Situate the context within what we are discussing.
So I'm saying
what we are discussing is not about figures necessarily.
Fantastic.
But the argument is about.
I'm asking you a simple question. Admitted that some police stations finished, voting at 1 p.m. in the 2020 elections.
Yes.
And I'm also saying that it is also a fact that some polling stations also at 5 p.m. people were still voting.
You see.
Now,
it is the more
if you look at this situation, how would 3 p.m. ending polls at 3 p.m. be a solution for why we should end polls on time?
Justice.
That's my issue.
The Electoral Commission is telling you that significant number of polling stations, based on the structural reforms that is put in place, had finished voting.
Significant number. How many polling stations?
Justice. I mean, such a question. Unless, of course, you do not ask such a question that.
No, when you finish
out of the 39,000 polling stations, you are expecting me to hold brief for the Electoral Commission, probably go and quote that.
But we can't sit here and say that the Electoral Commission says significant numbers, and so we should take it hook, line, and sinker.
But we can sit here and go by your interpretation that because some section of people had not finished voting by 5 p.m., we should also take like
that is a reason. That is one of the reasons why we need to draw the Electoral Commission's attention.
And I'm saying that the solution is not that
probably the solution.
Good. So the extension of your logic, then we should even extend it to 10 p.m. What I'm drawing your attention to it now is that when you bring the pool at 3 p.m., it is going to ensure that people who vote quite earlier, as what happened in the 2012 election. What it means is that it's going to translate into the Electoral Commission actually collating the results faster. And that natural anxiety that comes with the delay or associated with the delay of the results relative to the coalition entering into the night and this overall national security implications is something that is going to be dealt with.
I think this is the situation. We are closing polls at 3, right? You have a polling station that started at the stipulated time. At 3 o'clock, people were still voting. Should Electoral Commission end the voting at those polling stations because you're supposed to close at 3?
Justice, you are talking as though the Electoral Commission operates at only one polling station. Even the law is clear. No, the law is clear.
Ask a simple question. Unless you didn't listen to me.
No, the law is clear.
I'm saying that we have about 39,000 polling stations. You may not have all the 39,000 polling stations finishing polls at exactly 3 o'clock, true or false?
Even when it is 5 p.m., all the 39,000 police, that's not even finished the plan 5 p.m.
Isn't it the more reason why isn't that the more reason why people are disagreeing with the 3 o'clock that the Electoral Commission is talking about? Because even if at 5 o'clock people are unable to finish on time and you are proposing 3 o'clock, how will people finish at 3?
You are talking as though when we say 3 p.m. and it closes at 3 p.m., everybody that comes after is disenfranchised. It doesn't happen like that. I am suggesting to you that most of these proposals that has been made actually complements each other. What it means is that if, for instance, for the purpose of our conversation here and the debate that we are having, if 90% have finished voting as at 3 p.m., which almost is reflective of what happened in 2020, that 90% should be counted.
No.
Rather than waiting till it gets into the night. Again, one major solution to the problem that you are laying to bear is such polling stations. We identify them and reduce the numbers by creating additional polling stations to them. The solution is not to say that, well, because we cannot change it to 3 p.m. Then, by the extension of your logic, they need more time. Let's make it 11 p.m. and so that we all go back to sleep. And I'm saying that election is not an event. All the security implications, the tension that comes with elections are all something that the Electoral Commission has to look at. You see, it is because maybe as a people we fail to probably to adapt to reforms and change. That is why we see this as a big deal.
So one of the issues raised by the NDC is that, look, the Electoral Commission promised to declare results in the 2020 polls at I think within 24 hours or so. Yeah. And they were unable to meet that deadline they gave to themselves and all of that. How then do you want Ghanaians to trust the EC that ending polls at 3, that is going to be done? That
is a very simplistic argument. I mean, so undeepened argument, because it's just on the face value. Because you need to interrogate the reasons why the EC was unable to deliver on such promise. Who prevented them? And then you dissociate justice. You have to dissociate it. They are two different issues. Who prevented them from justice? That was the issues were that the political actors involved failed to accept the results by signing. And so don't make it look like it was the EC which elected to
24 in the 30-man South, for instance. In 24 hours, there were some polling stations that were ready. Some were ready, but not all police stations were ready within 24 hours.
It is the more reason why the EC has proposed reform. That's why I'm saying that. You see, one thing that the panel failed to understand is that most of these reforms that have been proposed complements each other. There is a complementarity relationship that exists between some of these reforms that has been proposed. So, in this instance, those that are ready should be declared, provided they are satisfied at the original level, and then it reduces the tension and the anxiety. And so you cannot say that because the EC failed to honor its promise, especially at a time where probably what happens are within things that the EC did not cause, but the political actors, the political parties, the parliamentarians failed to sign and approve the results that came from the constituency level. But the Electoral Commission for that said that before they promised the 24 hours, deadline. Fantastic. It doesn't still change the Electoral Commission for making reforms, because the whole aim is to move forward at the end of the day. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think briefly. No, if he comes, I gave him more time than I. You gave me more time than I gave. But if he still wants to come, I also have the language. Briefly. I just wanted to say that. No, he touched on the electricity issue. It's an invitation for me. I think because you've acknowledged that you gave him, so it's only fair that you let me go there. Because he spoke about the electricity issue. Let's go. I think I will have the right. Your time with arguments and not being able to. Justice has admitted that he gave you more time than me. What I spoke about the electricity issue. Well, I have the option to speak on the electricity issue. Let me give some clarity. And Elikem, 2 minutes. Let me give a clarity. 2 minutes, even now. Let me give clarity and education to both my brother and our listeners who may not understand this. By law, if there's a polling station that has not achieved 100% turnout, you cannot close polls. So you cannot sit here and say that even when there's a polling station and there's you see the miseducation. That is why our proposal of reforms. You not sit here and think that I will not give you the time anymore if you do that. No, go ahead. I will not give you the time, because if you respond, trust me, if you respond, I'll give you the time. Go ahead. For anybody who is logical to even want to support a submission that when there's 90% turnout, you should close polls,
you should be ready for the 10% to take you to court the next time for not allowing them. You cannot disenfranchise anybody within the closure, within the space.
The reforms has no legislative backing.
That is why
it is the new CI is proposed.
That is why I am saying
it's educating people. It's a proposal.
That is why I am saying that proposal has fallen flat and cannot even find space anywhere in law. Because it will not even
CI is proposed, it will not be adopted by Parliament.
I think you have given me the opportunity to close without giving you the time, because you have used your time in interjection. But you will have the time to correct that, but you have chosen to respond.
To speak on the electricity issue.
I would never give you that time anymore. I'm sorry, you're my brother, you're my friend, but I won't do so.
In letting people know that.
Because the truth is that I asked you. You asked for a time. I asked you to allow him. I'll give you the opportunity to respond. No, they have to contain it. You can go ahead, Elikem. But in 1 minute,
yes,
step
the law
down.
Is the law. The law says that it is your right to vote.
The law doesn't act in retrospection. The law doesn't act in retrospection. We are talking about a futuristic thing.
And what is the retrospection? We are talking about no. These proposals are for the future, so you don't apply it retrospectively. That's what you have to know.
And so so you think that when you want to make such reforms, it will mean that you will have to.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming. I think that you could have been a gentleman at least, so that this program would have ended.
Highly unfair.
Unfortunately, your